Okay, let's get started. We're on page Gimel Amud Bet, a few lines from the bottom. You finding it? It's the one. Okay. So the Gemara. Hey, how are you? Okay, maybe you need to send him also the picture. The daf. You got the daf? Okay. The Gemara says at the bottom. I would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Maybe about 15 lines from the bottom. Tana Ha'avim. Can you see it? 2 lines before the end. Tana Ha'avim. You found it? Tana Ha'avim?
You're right. Yeah.
Okay.
Found it? Tana Ha'avim. Okay? Tana. The Mishnah teaches. Ha'avim va'aruchot, the clouds and the winds, shniot lematar, are second only to the rain. Okay? Shniot over here, comes from a language, the Tosafot says, like the words Mishneh lemelech. Mishneh lemelech Achashverosh, right? He was the number 2 in command. So wind and clouds are good for the crops, for the growth of things. They're second only to rain. So in other words, it's beneficial. Hechidami, the Gemara says, what does that mean? How does that work? Amar Ula says, V'item Rabbi Yehuda. Ula says, and some say in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, Dibatar Mitra. After the rain comes, we're talking about clouds and rain that follow a rainfall. Lememra de Malyutei. It seems to be saying, you're saying that they're second only to rain. You obviously mean that they're beneficial. V'aktiv, the pasuk says, it's talking about now in the Tochacha, so in the part where we're reading about all the curses that are going to befall the Jewish people when they screw things up. Yiten Hashem et mitar artzecha. Hashem will give the rain of your land, avak ve'afar, dust and sand. Okay. The Amar Ula. So what does that mean? Dust and sand. It means that the rain will be followed. The Amar Ula explains. V'itam Rabbi Yehuda. Zika de Batar Mitra. It refers to the wind that follows the rain. So what happens with the wind that follows the rain? It's a negative thing. It's mentioned in the Tochacha, in the chastising of Am Yisrael, where things are going to go wrong. And Ula explained that that's referring to, what does it mean that God will make the rain dust? What is that? How does rain become dust and dirt? The answer is, when the wind comes after the rain, it kicks up all of the mud, all of the sand. It spatters over all of the crops, and that can actually ruin and be detrimental for the crops. So we have one opinion from Ula saying that wind after rain is beneficial, but then you find Ula himself saying that wind after rain is negative, because you find it is expressed in the Torah, in the curses of the Tochacha. The Gemara answers, Lo kasha, it's not a question. Had de'ata nicha, this one refers to when it comes down soft, nicha, nach, like comforting, easy. Had de'ata razia, sometimes it comes raz, like in a hard way, okay? So the indication is when it pours, when it rains gently, then the wind that comes after a gentle rain is not a problem. Why? Because the gentle rain doesn't displace the mud and the sand to a point that the wind can kick it up. But a hard rain, which brings up the earth, it kind of loosens it and makes it separate, so that a wind that comes afterwards can kick it up in a negative way. Now, this is important to understand. So one of the things that we're doing when we're learning over here is, alongside the topic and the structure that we're learning together, I'm also trying to teach you a little bit of how the Gemara works. So we've seen this idea already a few times. We have a contradiction. One time he says it's good, one time he says it's bad. So the Gemara says, okay, well, all we know is that he said that wind after rain is good. But then we find wind after rain is bad. So obviously, what's the answer?
Which rain?
Which wind? Or which rain?
Yeah.
You see, either answer is possible. So the Gemara's first answer literally does exactly what you'd expect it to do. It's so important to actually get up and get ahead of how the Gemara's mind works, so that you're anticipating what the answer is going to be. So if we have a imra that says that wind after rain is good, wind after rain is bad, okay, what kind of wind? Okay, what kind of rain? First answers exactly that. What kind of rain? A soft rain or a hard rain? The ibait ema, and if you want, every time you see those words, the ibait ema, ibait means if you want, say, in other words, another way of saying this, or another answer, ibait ema, had ma avak, had lo ma avak. It's referring to two different kinds of winds. One kind of wind is a gentle wind after the rain. That's a beneficial wind. One kind of wind is a harsh wind after the rain, where it's literally pulling up all the dust. And that's what that one is referred to as the curse. Interestingly enough, you see the Ibait Ema is in parentheses. Why is it in parentheses? If we just look down at Rashi for 1 second, Rashi says this whole Ibait Ema doesn't exist, should not be in the Girsa. So if you look, you see Razia. You see the Rashi Razia, the first wide line in Rashi, which is over there, Razia. Yeah, if you scroll down, you see Rashi Razia. Razia says bekoach, with strength. Velo garsinan, and we do not have the terminology, the girsa, the girsa. How would you say girsa? The text, the version of the text. Right. Okay, yes. So the girsa, the version of the text which says v'ibait ema. Rashi says we don't have it. That's why it's placed parenthetically in the Gemara. So rather, what is it? What do we say instead? Ela hachi garsinan. This is what we mean to say. Rashi says actually the Gemara was not answering this kind of rain, or this kind of wind, this kind of wind, but rather it was saying this kind of rain or this kind of rain. And then the Gemara is explaining and says that with a soft kind of rain, it doesn't bring up the wind won't bring up the earth or the dust. With a difficult kind of rain, so Rashi actually learned it as one answer. I just thought this was a good place to be able to illustrate the type of mindset that one has to have when you're studying Gemara. The ability to nitpick and say, well, what was said and what did I assume? Which one of my assumptions was that? And I always say that famous line: you never assume because that makes. Okay, fine. Let's move on. So the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara continues. V'amar Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda then teaches, Zika debatar mitra, a wind after the rain, ki mitra is just as good as the rain itself. Similar to what we just read earlier about shniota. Eva batar mitra, clouds that follow rain, ki mitra is also as beneficial and as good as the rain. Shimsha debatar mitra, the sun that shines after the rain, kitre mitri, is as beneficial to the crops as 2 rains. Now, the first time I was studying this, I was like, what are we talking about? Why is this, it's like 1 rain, it's like 2 rains, it's beneficial, it's not, like, is the knowledge of the beneficence of the sun or not, it's not as good, double as good, does that make a difference to all of us? And the answer is, to us, no. But because none of us are farmers. Right. But remember, the whole of the Masechet of Taanit, if it's dealing with rain, why are we calling it Taanit? Why is it called a Masechet that deals with fasting? And the answer is because it was so important to their livelihood, literally to their ability to not starve to death, that they had to be keenly aware of what was beneficial and what wasn't beneficial. So today we have meteorologist Craig Allen. Back then they didn't have that. So they were looking to the Torah to give them the wisdom to understand, is sun after the rain, is that a good sign or a bad sign? Should we be praying that doesn't happen or that does happen? The wind that comes before or after, is that a positive sign, not a positive sign? Should we ask for wind before or after? Because they had a deep-seated emunah that what they would ask for would actually come true. If we didn't know what was beneficial, what wasn't beneficial, we might be asking for something that's actually working against us, okay? So even from the commonplace conversation of the Gemara, there's a tremendous amount to learn.
Robert,
yes?
Did somebody buy books? The rest?
We bought 6 books, and they were distributed to the ones that were there or that wanted.
When the books came,
because I thought because they asked who wants.
So no problem. We can pick up more. Just you need to tell us, I want one, and then we'll get you one. You write your name in it. You can bring it to Sunday and Wednesday. All right? We can do it that way. John is actually our secret man in Brooklyn. At 8 p.m. Okay, at the moment. All right. Now, the Gemara continues. Limeute mai. It kind of sounds from like Rabbi Yehuda, like everything after rain is good. Like, the wind after rain is good, the clouds after rain is good, the sun after rain is good. What other options are there? Like, you know what I mean? Every possible post-rain, result you just said was good. There's clouds, there's wind, there's sun. What else is there? An eclipse? What other possible thing is he coming to exclude? The Gemara answers, Limeute gilhi delelia, to exclude the light of the night. What is that referring to? When is there light in the night?
The moon.
Lightning.
Oh, like
lightning, okay? Because the moon doesn't shine, right? It's just a reflection of the sun. So limuta gili delelia, the lightning that lights up the night, okay? Or the second thing is vishimsha debeni kerchi, the sun that appears between the bald spots. What does that mean? The bald spots? It means when you have a bald guy who has like side hair. You know what I mean? I always felt there should be a committee that tells people when the right time, to get a I don't know what they call it, overpass. When it's there. There's no party on your head anymore. Those lone hairs, they're not keeping each other warm enough. Just go. Get the thing. Go for the bowling ball look. Get the wax. Lean in. Look like a nice Jordan. Okay. Now v'shimshi. So when the sun shines, the beni kirchi between the bald spots, yani, between if a guy has some patches of hair, some patches that with no hair, so that was considered to be a bad sign after the rain. So if you have a partially sunny appearance after the rainfall, or if you have lightning that comes after the rainfall,
Like partly cloudy.
partly
Like
cloudy,
partly sunny?
sun in and out after the rain is a bad sign. Sun right after the rain that's shining brightly in a blue sky, amazing. By the way, it's so interesting. I remember thinking when I read this, there's no feeling like after the rain when you have a bright, beautiful sun. It almost like lifts my spirits. And I thought to myself when I read the Gemara that rain is always considered a sign of beracha, correct? And the Gemara here says that sun after rain is double rain, which means like double level of beracha. I don't know why people don't talk about that. And it's amazing how, without anyone telling you, you just have this inner like joy that when the sun kind of comes out through the rain and the rain stops and the sun is shining brightly in the sky. But you see here clearly, the Gemara says double beracha. So that's a good time to buy a lottery ticket. Okay, the Gemara continues.
So lightning and partially sunny is not a good sign.
Not a good sign. And that's why Rav Yehuda, he mentioned these three, he was coming to exclude these other two. Okay?
But many times it lightens during rain and there's like leftover.
During, it's not part of it.
So just like completely after.
Mm.
No rain, lightning.
No rain, then no rain and lightning.
Got it.
Okay? Amar Rava. Rava says, Ma'ali talga, another good thing to realize. In the study of Aramaic, all the time, the taf and the shin are interchangeable. Okay? So you have this concept that when you see, like as an example, how do you say an ox in Hebrew?
Sure.
Shor. How do you say an ox in Aramaic? Tor or tura. Okay? So what would this be over here? Talga.
Shelig.
Shelig. Shalga. Shelig. Okay? So again, it helps to start learning these little tricks in Aramaic. So as you go, you're able to kind of pick up more and more in the actual text. So talga leturi, a snow on the mountain, is kehamisha mitri.
Because that's how the words come in Arabic. Short in Arabic is tor,
Okay.
and sheleg in Arabic is telij.
Telij, exactly.
So the gimel is-
You're just having the Yemenite j. Okay, fantastic. There we
Actually,
go.
no, we don't have. There's no g in the Arabic alphabet.
There's no g. There's
Right.
just the j.
J. Unless you're
Okay.
Egyptian, and then all the Egyptians.
Then you're Egyptian.
Then you're Egyptian.
Gotcha. Okay, fine. So the Gemara says that Rava teaches us that the sheleg, the snow on the mountaintop, is kehamisha mitri la'ara. It's like 5 rainfalls for the earth. It's as good as that amount. Shne'emar ki lesheleg ye'amer heve aretz. The pasuk says that God says to the snow, heve aretz, be on the land. V'geshem matar, v'geshem mitrot uzo. And the rain of his beneficence, of the rainfall, the geshem and the rains mitrot uzo, of his powerful rain. So you see that in the aftermath of sheleg, we have 5 different words associated with the rain that it is compared to. So he says ki the sheleg yemar heva aretz and geshem matar v'geshem mitrot uzo. Different mefarshim count the 5 differently, but the point is that's how beneficial a snow-topped mountain is. The Amar Rava continues and says, Talga leturi, the sheleg, the snow of the mountaintops, mitra razia lailani. The snow work is as good for the mountains as Matar razia li'ilnani. So the best case scenario for a mountain is snow. Best case scenario for trees is mitra razia, is a strong rain. Remember, the tree's roots grow deeper and deeper. And not only that, they need to drink more and more in order to be able to deliver the beneficial elements of that water to the deepest stretches of its leaves. So therefore, the ilanot need strong rain. Mitranicha leperi, but produce needs a softer rain, because a strong rain sometimes can dislodge the vegetables, and as well can saturate it to too great a degree. Urfila afilu lepartzida, but the what's it called? We continue on Daf Dalet Amud Aleph. Urfila, the lightest rain, the smallest, thinnest rain, is good. Lepartzida, the tutikala, is good even for the seeds. The tutikala that sit under kala, the blocks or the clods of the earth, mahanya. It helps even for that. Now, what I always thought was so amazing is you think to yourself about how HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to rain. It needs to rain, in the earth. And if you have rain, great. If it's not raining, it's not. No one thinks about the variable levels of rain that each part needs. Why is snow the most beneficial for the mountain? Because since the mountain is by definition sloped, any rain that falls on the mountain doesn't. It doesn't. Oh, we'll break in a minute for just put it over here. It's fine. Yeah. Any rain that falls on the mountain actually doesn't saturate the mountain. It just rolls down the side of the mountain.
How does it differentiate between gentle and light?
What's the difference between gentle? Thinner and thinner. In England, they have a great word. My favorite word:
Fog.
spitting.
Oh.
When it's raining, it's just so little the rain that you walk out in the rain. You're like, I don't even need a coat for this,
Yeah.
right? So it's not drizzling. It's even less than that. It's like almost misting. Okay, so the thinnest rain, like a spray almost. Okay, so the thinnest rain is good for the seeds that are. Why? Again, remember, the seeds are not even developed to the point where they have any roots growing out of them yet. So when you have a clod of earth and the rain falls and it slowly starts to dissipate in between the cracks in the earth, that helps the seeds grow. My urfilia, where do we get this name from? It definitely did not come from Shakespeare. My urfila, urufili. Sorry, we're on the top of the next page. Yeah? Urufili. Rashi says, what does it mean, urufili? Shesotem sitke haaretz. It seals up the cracks in the earth. In other words, it puts moisture in those cracks. Lishna achrina, shemegadele mitzamechet agarinina, omdim besitke hakarka. Or it makes its way into the cracks in the earth where the seeds might be. Okay? Ve'amar Rava. Rava continues to teach. Hai tsurba merabanan. These young scholars, dami lepertzida de tutekala, are compared to the seeds that find themselves underneath the clods of earth. The kivan de navat. Once they've sprouted forth, once they've grown above the level of the earth, navat, they grow wildly. Now, I found this very interesting because Rashi, whose normal job is to teach us the simple version, the simple interpretation of the text, Rashi says something slightly different. Look at the words in the navat, 3 lines down in the narrow lines. Shematchil levatzvetz v'la'alot. Once it starts to grow and rise, ole lemala, it rises high. Kach tamid chacham, so too, a wise scholar, kivan shiatza shemo, once he becomes well known, people start to hear about him, holech vegadel lemala, he grows and becomes very, very famous, and he grows and he becomes very, very big. And I found this very interesting because in the comparison to a seed that's breaking the earth, that's coming forward, right? That's not about anybody else's realization. That's not about someone else noticing. So I would have translated this if I did not have Rashi guiding me. I would have understood that this Mishnah is telling you, this Gemara is telling you, that once a Talmid Chacham reaches a certain level, suddenly there's an acceleration of his growth period. Sometimes a person looks and they're like, oh my gosh, it's taking me so long. I only learned 2 pages, but that's not how it works. As you learn, your learning actually accelerates. So you can't extrapolate how long it took to get from here to here. The perfect example would be someone who sits there after Kal Nidre, He looks, he's like, Shema said, we only did 2 pages, and we've been in shul for 2 hours. Because there was bidding, there's this girl, they're taking out the Torahs, they're walking this way, everyone forgot who bought the 4th Sefer. Everything takes a while. But once you hit Arbit, Baruch Atam, you start moving in a faster way. So I think what Rava was trying to communicate was that a young scholar should not feel intimidated by how long it's taking him to grow, and to think to himself, I'll never be anybody. Because you know what? You keep putting in that effort, and once you actually start to sprout, that sprouting happens in a much more rapid way. But once I realized that that's what Rava meant, I understood also what Rashi was trying to communicate. Because ultimately, fame for a true Torah scholar is not about being recognized. It's not about the fame, it's not about the power, it's not about the notoriety, it's not about the honor. But without people knowing who you are, the wells of Torah that you have inside you, you can't share them. You might be the smartest guy, most inspirational, motivational teacher in the world. If nobody knows who you are, if no one's coming to the class, how are you going to teach anything? There's no way for you to be able to communicate that wisdom. So again, he was communicating Tzur bar Merabanan. Now there's actually a case in the courts, right, in the court of public opinion that's happening right now in Manhattan. A whole messy story with one of the local synagogues between an elderly rabbi, a rabbi who's 91 years old, and the young rabbi in his midst. And what's interesting is that there are people that are standing up for the rabbi because he's old. And I'm in a WhatsApp chat with some rabbis, and quite a few of the rabbis said, we have to stand up for the young rabbi because he's young. If this is how young rabbis are treated, if they're not given respect, if they're not empowered, then we won't have any more young rabbis. So I thought it's such an interesting thing. On the one hand, you have people trying to defend one side because he's old, but there's also a logic to defend the other side because he's young. So it's like we would call in the expression of Gemara learning, svarot hafuchot, which means there's contradictory logic here. Each one kind of stands on their own 2 feet. Ve'amar Rava continues, Hay tzurba merabanan, this young rabbi, diratach oraita, hu dekamir tachale. You see a young rabbi who gets very worked up, hot under the collar. You see he's very passionate. He gets upset about a lot of things. Oraita hu dekamirat chale. It is the Torah learning inside of him that's actually causing him to be a person who gets upset. Why? What's the logic there? Shneimar, it says in the pasuk, "Halo kod divarai." God says, "So are my words not ka'esh, like fire, ne'um Hashem." The words of Torah, they are a fire. They light a fire in a person. So you have a person, today people say, "Rabbi, I don't understand. All these religious people, why can't they just live and let live?" I have all my secular friends. The Torah is about derech eretz, isn't it? The Torah is about good midot, isn't it? Why? I have all these friends secular. They're happy for everyone to be whatever they want, identify like this, like that, mabarif, whatever you want, fadal, no problem. They don't care. All these only people that are fighting are these black hats, these crazy religious people. The pasuk is saying, of course, if you don't stand for anything, what's going to bother you? But when a person starts to learn Torah and become principled, it bothers them when principles are not being adhered to. If you don't care about justice, so if there's a miscarriage of justice, why are you going to care? So the Torah is communicating, halokod devarai ka'esh ne'um Hashem, when a person, a young rabbi, gets upset, right? He's getting upset because of the Torah in him. Now, I had a follow-up on this. Tzur bar merabanan usually refers to a sharp young rabbi, not in his clothes. It means in his grasp, in his mind. Why does Rava say that when a young scholar gets angry, it's his Torah that's getting him angry? Why doesn't it just say Talmid Chacham that gets angry? I think what the Gemara is communicating is an older scholar doesn't lose the fire of his Torah, but he learns how to develop a technique to understand when it's worth showing that anger and that upset. You could be heartbroken over something, but sometimes the only response that you have, if you want to keep the person in the game, is one that's controlled. And I think that's something that actually comes with age. What a shanda, they say it would be. What a tragedy it would be if you had a Talmid Chacham that was getting on in age who lost his fire, and many times you actually see it's not that they're controlling their fire, it's that their fire went out long ago. They're not passionate, they're not excited, they're not working hard. So we see that in Tzur B'Mirabanan. How do I know this? Because the very next statement in the Gemara. Ve'amar Rav Ashi says, Kol Talmid Chacham, any Talmid Chacham. Here he didn't say Tzur B'Mirabanan. He says, any Talmid Chacham, she'eno kashe kebarzel, eno Talmid Chacham. Any Talmid Chacham that is not hard, stiff like iron, is not a Talmid Chacham. Shene'emar, like the pasuk says, ukefatish yifotzetz sela. It's comparing Torah to a hammer. Yifotzetz sela, that can shatter a stone. So it's illustrating that when a person has principles, who's not willing to stand up for them, not willing to break anything, so to speak, that's challenging that thing. If you're not willing to fight, if you're not willing to stand up, if you're not willing to speak up, then eno Talmid Chacham. He's not someone who actually studied the Torah at all. Yes?
Why is Rabba a Surba and then Rabbi Ashi is Talmid Chacham? Like you said, the difference.
That's my point.
So the
Because
first
when
one-
you're referring to, like, losing your temper, that's
a young
something.
rabbi?
That's something you would say is a young rabbi.
Got it.
Okay? So if you see a young rabbi that doesn't lose, older rabbi doesn't lose his temper,
He lost.
it's not. It could be because he's lost the fire, but there's another possibility, and that might be that he's matured in his understanding about how to regulate that to be able to achieve maximum result.
Well, what does this have to do with the weather and the rain and the wind?
Fantastic question. This is one of the things also we learn about Gemara. Okay, we just started with saying that a young rabbi. We talked about the light rain watering the seed underneath the clod of earth. Rava says that seed under the clod of earth is like a Talmid Chacham. Then we carried on that line and said, what else do we know about a Talmid Chacham? Okay, so if you can imagine it, it's a little bit like hyperlinks.
Yeah.
You ever find yourself somewhere in the internet and you're like, how am I here? But if you traced it back, you were reading an article about jurisprudence, and all of a sudden you clicked on a link that said something interesting about a baseball glove, a court case about a baseball glove. Next thing you know, you're literally shopping for a baseball glove, okay? So some of that will give you an idea about how the Gemara sometimes takes
So just rolls
a
with
tangent, rolls with it, exactly. And then sometimes the Gemara will then eventually, go back to where we were before. Okay. Amale Rabbi Abba le Rav Ashi. Rabbi Abba said to Rav Ashi, Atun mehata matnitahu. You learned that concept about a Talmid Chacham having a certain inner strength. Let me rephrase that. About the need for a Talmid Chacham to have a certain amount of inflexibility. Happens all the time. Rabbi, can you marry me? But the only problem is my girlfriend she's half Jewish. She's 3/4 Jewish. Her grandmother might be Jewish, or Rabbi, please, I need you to do this, I need you to do that. I'm not really sure. Or what happened today? I got a message from someone asking me, Rabbi, can you please write me a letter giving me a religious exemption to not get a vaccine for the hospital? The hospitals are accepting rabbis signing documents that it's against our religion to get a vaccine. So I wrote back, I'm really sorry I can't give you that document. I myself, my wife, and my kids all have got the vaccine. So I'm sorry, I don't think I can sign that for you. So literally, I get forwarded back 2 PDFs of a list of rabbis that say that you're not supposed to get the vaccine and it's a danger to your health. And I just wrote back one line, so get them to sign it.
Yeah.
And then I saw for 10 minutes, ... Maybe she was thinking about what to write. And I just wrote back, I cannot sign something I don't believe in. The ... stopped blinking. And I understand. So that's where we left it off, okay? So there needs to be a certain amount of inflexibility. My wife wanted to go to the hospital for the birth of my granddaughter. She wanted to be in the room. So what did she do? They're not letting you in now because of COVID. So you're allowed to go in if you're a doula, if you're a labor coach. So my wife signed up to become a doula. My daughter wound up going into labor early. So my wife did not have the chance to be able to complete the course of being a doula. So she said she has to go to the hospital. So she says, can I just go in and tell them I'm a doula? I said, we're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to, can't say it's not true. I said you could say you registered as a doula, and if they ask you no follow-up questions, no further questions, Your Honor, you can walk right in, right? If they say, well, you registered, but did you complete it? You're not allowed to lie. Just because you want to go in doesn't allow you to lie, right? She walks into the hospital, no one asks her anything. She's like, yes. She carries on walking, and as she's walking, someone says, why are you here? So she says, I'm the labor coach. They said, oh, you're the labor coach? She said, yes. No problem. Allowed to say that, okay? They didn't ask the follow-up question. Are you a registered doula or are you a whatever completed? Okay. Now, so the Gemara is communicating the need for a rabbi to have inflexibility. And I always point this out. That means that if the rabbi doesn't have anything he's inflexible about, then he's not a rabbi. He's a tool of the people.
Yeah.
Just giving them what they want, saying yes to everything. I love my rabbi. He never makes anything difficult. Then you're just your own rabbi.
Right. It's reform.
Okay. Carries on the Gemara. Rav Abba said to Rav Ashi, Atun mehata matnido. You learned this from there. Anan mehacha matnitana. I learned it from here. The pasuk says, Eretz asher avaneha barzel. God says that Eretz Israel is a land asher avaneha barzel, that its stones are made of iron. Al tikri avaneha. Don't read avaneha. Its stones are iron. Ela bonea, the ones that build it.
This is like
Taanit B'Eliyahu. Who are boneha? Are the Talmidei Chachamim. So we see that the bonaich are who? The ones who build Am Yisrael are the Talmidei Chachamim. So Eretz Asher Avaneha Barzel, the ones who build it, are steel, are iron. That refers to the Chachamim. Amar Ravina. Ravina says, Afilu hachi mibayele leinish lemelaf nafshe benichuta. Even though you say all of this, and this is such a classic line from the Gemara, Afilu hachi mibayele leinish lemelaf nafshe benichuta. A person must teach himself. Lemelaf means yalif, means to learn. A person must teach himself to be kind. Shneimar, like the pasuk says, ve'aser ka'as milibecha. Take the anger out of your heart. What did I say earlier? That's only Surban Rabanan. A young rabbi who's not yet learned or taught himself or learned to control himself. He's still hot under the collar. He's still green. But as a person goes older, a person has to be able to control himself. And this is what I was saying before. You see, v'haser ka'as milibecha. You have to remove the anger from the heart, which means that if in your heart you're not angry, you're not a Talmid Chacham. You have to get angry in your heart and then have it not be expressed. I got a message from one of my students that unfortunately is engaging in an illicit relationship today. Gets me upset. If it doesn't get you upset, you need to quit your job. Okay? You've gotten used to it. Amar v'gomer. Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yonatan. Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Nachmani, said the name of Rabbi Yonatan. Shlosha sha'alu shelo kehogen. There are 3 people who asked inappropriately. Okay? Now the Gemara is going back to the concept of asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for things. We'll end with this piece in the Gemara. 3 people asked inappropriately. L'shnayim heshivuhu kahogen. What's it called? 2 of them, they answered them appropriately. L'achad heshivuhu shelo kahogen. And one of them was answered inappropriately. Eluhen. Eliezer. We just learned about it in the parasha. Eliezer, the servant of Abraham. V'Shaul ben Kish. Shaul, the son of Kish. V'yiftach ha-Giladi. And Yiftach, the Giladi, was a shofet. Eliezer, Eved Abraham, Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, where do we find that? He made a deal with God. He said, the maiden that I will say, give me your pitcher and I will drink from it. And she'll say back, I'll give you to drink and I'll even give your camels to drink. What would have happened if she was a girl that was disabled? If she was blind? So he would have made the deal with God, had to take her as the wife of Yitzchak Avinu, and so he asked in an inappropriate way. Heshivu kahogen. Still Hashem answered him appropriately. V'nizdamna lo Rivka. And who did he chance upon? Hashem brought Rivka to be the one that fulfilled the condition. Shaul ben Kish, what do you find? Dichtiv, he said, V'haya ha'ish asher yakenu ya'ashrenu hamelech osher gadol. The person that will strike him down, I will grant him tremendous riches. He makes a deal with all of his soldiers. Anyone, who's he talking about? Goliath. There was a giant in the Philistine army. His name was Goliath, he was a giant amongst men, and he would win the entire battle by himself. Okay, so he promised anyone that could knock down this guy, I'll give him tremendous reward. Osher gadol ve'et bito yiten lo, and I will also allow him to marry my daughter. Okay, ahlan wa sahlan. Pull up an extra chair from the corner. Okay, yachol afilu eved. What would have happened if one of the servants, someone who wasn't Jewish, would step up and be the one that slayed Goliath? Afilu mamzer. What if someone that came from an illicit, adulterous relationship, who's not allowed to marry someone who's Jewish? What would have happened if someone like that would have killed Goliath? Still, his shivo kahogan, Hakadosh Baruch Hu answered him appropriately. V'nizdamen lo, who became Shaul's begrudging son-in-law? King David. Ironically, after throwing the dice and being rewarded with a son-in-law like David, and not an Eved, and not a Mamzer, he got David HaMelech. Shaul didn't want David HaMelech, and he gave his daughter to someone else. But the point is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu answered him still kahogen. Yiftach HaGeladi, the final person that asked inappropriately, is Yiftach from the part of Israel called Gilad. Dichtiv, the pasuk says, "V'haya yotzeh asher yetzeh midalte beti." Yiftach asked Hashem for success in war against the Moabites, and at that moment, Hakadosh Baruch Hu could have chosen to listen to his prayer or not. So how did Yiftach decide to sweeten the pot for God? He says, "Whatever comes out the door of my home, I'm going to bring as a korban, as a sacrifice." Yachol afilu davar tameh. It could have been a cat, a dog that emerged from his house. Hishivo shalo kahogen. Hashem answered him not according to the way he wanted. Nizdamna lo bito. Who came out the door? His own daughter. V'hainu deka'ama lehu navi liYisrael. And this is what the Navi, the prophet, said to Israel. Hasari en begilad im rofe ayin sham. Look at Rashi. Rashi says on the words, De'ama lehu navi midegale bekra. From the fact that Pasuk taught us ve'amar and said Hasari en begilad alma de lo haveniche kameshmaya keda'amrina Hasari en begilad. From the fact that the Navi said to Yiftach HaGeladi, what did he say to him? He said Hasari en begilad. What does that mean? Hasari, if you want to turn the page. Oh, you don't have a page. Hasari en begilad. There's no solution for Gilad. There's no rofe ayin sham. There's no doctor that you need to resort to say this. Yiftach had the ability, after making an inappropriate neder, he had the ability to go to a rofe, to go to a doctor, to get it healed. He could have went to a court of a Beit Din, and they could have annulled his, his vow. So therefore, from the fact that the Navi said that, you see God didn't appreciate what Yiftach had said, and therefore the result was that his daughter came out from the doorpost. The Gemara continues and says, on this last Sha'alo Shelo Kehogen, Vichtiv, and the Pasuk says, Asher lo tziviti v'lo dibarti v'lo alta libi. I didn't command you to say something like this. I didn't speak to you this way. It never entered my heart. Asher lo tziviti ze beno shel Misha melech Moav. What is this trifecta that I did not command and I did not speak and never entered into my mind? The Asher lo tziviti refers to the son of Misha, the king of Moav. And the pasuk says over there by Misha, "Vayikach et beno habechor asher yimloch tachtav v'ya'alehu olah." He took the king, the crown prince, and he brought him up. This king of Moab, he brought him as a korban. He says, "I didn't want that. I never asked for that." Velo dibarti. What does it mean that God says, "I never said to do this"? This refers to the case Ze Yiftach, the case of Yiftach that we just mentioned. And finally, what's velo alta libi, that never entered my mind? Ze Yitzchak ben Avraham. Yitzchak ben Avraham. God also said, "Ha'aleu sham," bring him up the mountain. God never said the words. Never, not one time did God say to sacrifice him, to kill him. All God said was, bring him up. Now, the reason why Hashem said it in that way was so that it would be open to interpretation, so that Abraham could see. He could see if Abraham would be willing to do so, right? But once Abraham got up there, Hashem says, look, I never said that. I said something which was open to dual interpretation. And when Abraham took Yitzchak onto the Mizbeach, we all say till today, look, you see, Abraham brought his son on the Mizbeach. Yeah, but he didn't do anything. Why are we still claiming reward for something Abraham didn't do? The answer is Abraham fulfilled the commandment. Because the commandment didn't say anything more than ha'aleu. And that was what we did. And therefore God says on that, Velo alta alibi. It never entered my mind to ask Yitzchak ben Abraham. We're going to continue from Amar Rabbi Baracha next week, Be'ezat Hashem.